Well, the new board of the National Reconstruction Fund has held its first meeting in Sydney today. This is the government's $15 billion scheme designed to provide finance for emerging technologies and industries through a range of loans, guarantees and direct investment. There are a few familiar names on the board, which is chaired by climate investor Martine Wilder. Other members include the former Liberal Minister Kelly O'Dwyer, the former boss of Australia Post Ahmed Fahour, and the former Australian Workers' Union leader Ed Walton. Industry Minister Ed Husic was there for the board's first meeting today and joined me a short time ago. Ed Husic, thanks for your time. Let's talk about this first meeting of the National Reconstruction Fund board. What are you hoping to achieve with this board?
It's a milestone day today, Andrew. This marks the formal transfer of responsibility into this independent board that will manage the National Reconstruction Fund and the $15 billion that will be available to revitalise manufacturing and create jobs. And so the big message that I'll be delivering, or I've delivered today, to the board is the need for us to be able to obviously get on with the job of making those investments. We've brought together a really high calibre board with different skills from different parts of the country to get that happening. And so it all kicks off in a very formal sense from today.
You've got Dan Walton on there, Kelly O'Dwyer, Ahmed Fahour. What skills do they bring to the roles?
You look at the industry backgrounds of the people that are involved. They're bringing industry and investment expertise from different walks of life as well. And in particular, if you look at our chair, Martine Wilder, who's sat on a similar body that's run for quite some time in the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, and he comes over and brings as well the experience that we need to be able to have low emissions technology manufacture in the country and put it to use as part of the transition and create jobs in the process. Obviously, someone like Dan Walton has been someone who's been closely focused on building manufacturing capability in this country, particularly through his former role in the Australian Workers' Union. You look at someone like Catherine Giles from WA, who's looking at medical manufacture, been involved in venture capital and commercialisation, really important. You look at someone like Catherine Presser, who's been involved in energy and resources, through to someone like Kelly O'Dwyer, who's currently working in the investment field but brings deep knowledge of the operation of government and the way in which these type of bodies work. So as I said, that's some, not all of the people that we've brought on the board, but big focus, revitalise manufacturing, sharpen the nation's technology skill and create good, well-paying, secure, long-term jobs.
How quickly can you get the grants out there? Obviously, it's taken a long time to set up. We might only see a few before the election.
Well, I guess you've got on your show one of the most impatient people in government. I'm very keen for this to hit the ground running as soon as possible, Andrew. The $15 billion will be made up either as loans, guarantees, equity, taking those stakes in companies that will grow. These will be solely or mainly Australian-based firms that'll be looking in or operating in around just over half a dozen priority areas that are responsible for the focus of the National Reconstruction Fund. So clearly we want this to happen quickly. We want, as much as I'm impatient, want this to happen. We want the right decisions, not rushed decisions, because the investments that are being made, Andrew, need to deliver a return to the taxpayer. And the big difference between the National Reconstruction Fund and what people have seen under the coalition is this is not about political interest, it's about what's in the national economic interest. And we want this board to get that right.
So it's interesting you say that. Having this board, I assume that means you think that you'll never have to suffer a pork barrelling accusation out of all this?
Absolutely not. We want this board, it's deliberately designed to be an independent board. We want this to be making decisions that stack up. The people that step forward need to have a thorough business case that can show what they're doing to develop manufacturing capability in line with the priority areas, that they're creating jobs and that they can deliver a return for the taxpayer. So it won't be at all the colour-coded spreadsheets fiasco that you've seen under a coalition that they love grants because they can deliver them and make the calls on political lines. We've got a big job to do here in rebuilding manufacturing, reducing our dependency on concentrated supply lines and supply chains, Andrew. We're trying to undo 10 years of neglect effectively under the coalition when it comes to manufacturing. We lived through this experience in the course of the pandemic. We've seen what's happened with geopolitics and trade. We do need to build capability in key areas, and the NRF's tasked to get on with that job.
This released today by your colleague Chris Bowen of a costing on the price of a nuclear industry in Australia. He's talking about replacing all of coal with nuclear, the price of that, $387 billion. But it would only be one form of energy if it was introduced, right? Why is Labor so opposed to a nuclear industry?
Because it's a distraction by the coalition. The focus is on trying to get to net zero and making the transition occur. The cheapest, most efficient forms of energy generation and renewables, Andrew, solar and wind. And they can be done a lot quicker and rolled out a lot quicker than what it would take to roll out nuclear. And just please appreciate how weird this policy proposition being put forward by the coalition is. On one hand, they want to build all these nuclear power plants in different parts of the country that also require a long time to get community consent on, right? And there's another part of the coalition in the National Party that don't want to build the transmission lines. So between them, the Liberals want to build nuclear energy and the Nationals don't want to build transmission lines. Where does this energy, even if they make it stack up, how does it get delivered where it's needed most? It's a policy mix for confusion, and not to deliver the energy transition that's needed by the coalition. And it represents a continuation of their inability when they were in government to get energy plans sorted out. We were basically left behind compared to where the rest of the world was at in getting this sorted. And it's just basically, as I said at the start, it's basically confusion, distraction by the coalition, and will not really meet energy needs longer term.
And I wanted to ask you, while I've got you, about this story in The Australian a week or two ago concerning the dumping of committed funding for a sovereign satellite program up to $1.2 billion. It was money agreed to with the Americans. What was the thinking behind walking away from this?
If you look at that program, this was $1.2 billion, Andrew, that was announced in the March 2022 budget, the last budget of a 9-year coalition government, weeks out from the May federal election. This is a difficult decision, and I accept that there are some people that are disappointed by that decision. But this is what happens when you're left with the fiscal and budgetary mess that we inherited: $1 trillion of debt, huge budget deficits, and the triggered inflation and interest rate increases. So in looking forward, we all had to make, as ministers, contributions to savings to help in budget repair. Given no contracts were let, no tenders were issued for this program, I had to make the tough call of returning that money to the budget as part of that overall contribution towards budget repair.
Wouldn't it have been useful to have our own satellites?
Well, it's always hard. It's easy to announce $1.2 billion, as you saw the coalition. They loved announcing new programs and new spending. It's always harder to cut that spending. And while I do appreciate that there'll be people that say we could be using that to build capability, the space sector is very important. It's why we've opened up the NRF to be able to be used as an investment vehicle to support the activity that's happening on the ground already. We've got an industry growth program we announced in our last budget of $400 million that'll be opened up, and also made sure that the Australian Space Agency was on sustainable footing as well to help in the coordination of that. So there's a lot of support that is available, but again, if you inherit a budget mess and there's an expectation you'll wind back government spending to try and reduce inflation, put downward pressure on inflation and interest rates. These are some of the tough calls that are forced on you when you've had a coalition that's accepted no responsibility for the spending mess that they left behind. And now they're criticising myself and the decision that's been made here. They want us to reduce the budget deficit, but then also criticise us for the decisions that are made in that. Something's got to give, and it's clear that the coalition hasn't learnt the lessons of the last election.
Industry Minister Ed Husic, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Appreciate your time. Thanks, Andrew.